Our best medical hope is now officially gravity. My wife was pregnant with our second child, but she was confined to strict bed rest in the hospital at 24 weeks into her pregnancy. And she had to have her feet elevated. Now you'd think, with all the advances in medical science, they might come up with a better way to prolong the pregnancy and keep the baby in than elevating your feet. But apparently that's the best they could come up with. So there we are in the hospital, fingers crossed, ankles in the air, which beats their backup plan, which I think involved a wine cork and some duct tape. I just wasn't getting a good vibe from the hospital to begin with. My wife had this one nurse who was a chain smoker, which is really a quality you want in your nurse. And every day I would come by the hospital and visit my wife, I would see this nurse outside during a cigarette break, and our eyes would meet through a cloud of smoke. And she had a hooded sweatshirt. She always had her hood on, and her skin was like leather, like a grayish yellow leather. I mean, let's be honest, my wife's nurse was the Grim Reaper. Anyway, my wife ended up giving birth to our daughter Lindsay just shy of 26 weeks. And, yeah, I know, right? And Lindsay spent 4 months in what's called the NICU, which is intensive care for preemies. And then after 4 months, Lindsay came home. And when you bring a preemie home, it's not like bringing home a full-term baby. At least it wasn't for my wife and I, because when that preemie's up in the NICU, every breath that child takes during his or her life is monitored by lots of monitors. And there's a team of medical professionals that completely take care of you. It's like you've been upgraded to the first-class section of the hospital. Just fully attend to every need. But then eventually, one day, they tell you to pull your car around. And then some chatty volunteer wheels you downstairs and kicks you to the curb. And all of a sudden, first class turns into the car rental shuttle bus before you know it. Well, when Lindsay was about 1 year old, she was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, CP as it's called. And that's pretty much when the brain is giving the muscles some misinformation. Fake news from the brain. And Lindsay's first 5 or 6 years were marked with procedures and surgeries and treatments and walkers and casts and you name it. If it was out there, she had it. And as her dad, at that point in time, I thought my role was to try and fix her, to try and repair her. And I think a lot of us parents do that. Our kids come home every day and it's like, we open up the garage bay, we back them in, we put them up on the lift, we take a look under the hood, and we see what kind of damage they've inflicted on themselves that day, and then we want to repair them and send them back out the next day. But Lindsay, with all the things she had been through in her young life, she wasn't like that at all. She needed no repair. She was amazingly resilient, remarkably optimistic, and just a ray of light. My wife and I noticed when she was young, around that age, she just craved attention. She loved the spotlight. When she was in kindergarten, they would wheel her around from class to class in a wagon. She was like a 5-year-old Cleopatra, and she loved it. And so at that point, I started to think, maybe the CP in some way helped define her personality. Maybe it gave her permission to be somebody different or somebody special. I don't really know if that's true, but what I do know is, as Lindsay got a little bit older and was now headed towards her teenage years, things changed for her, as it often does for kids that age. At that point, Lindsay really didn't want to be the center of attention anymore. She didn't want to be in the spotlight. She just wanted to be another kid and blend in the crowd. Well, around age 11, Lindsay had another procedure done, and this happened down in New Jersey. He was the only doctor in America who was doing this procedure, and he was sketchy. He was really sketchy. So we called him up and we said insurance wasn't going to cover the procedure. He was very clear with his instructions. He said, do this. Get an unmarked envelope, fill it with cash, come to my office, meet my son around back at night. I don't know why it had to be at night or an unmarked envelope, but, I figured it's Jersey and that's how they do things down here. I don't know. So then this doctor told us he rented an operating room for the procedure. Like when you rent a banquet hall for a function? I didn't even know you could rent an operating room. Maybe I could rent an operating room, play doctor. So he wanted to show us around his rental operating room the day before. We would go in there. He didn't even know how to turn the lights on in the operating room. So overflowing with confidence at this point. Procedure happens, and it is a brutal recovery for Lindsay and for her parents. She couldn't walk for months, and I did what any intelligent, mature parent of a child with a disability would do. I yelled at her. I screamed at her. I tried to trick her into walking, and I thought it was all in her head, right? But what I realized was, if she was going to walk again, her mind and her body were going to hook up, and it was going to happen on its own. And thank God it did. A few months later, she was walking. And around the same time, she came to us with a request. She said, can I do a 5K race called Girls on the Run? My wife and I said, sure, with a pretty serious eye roll, but she went to practice every day. Next thing you know, it's the race day. We show up at the Champlain Valley Fairgrounds, about 1,000 girls there, and we're at the starting line. And I'm doing my best Secret Service impersonation. I'm going to keep everyone 3 feet away from her because I'm just worried about her. The gun goes off, and Lindsay takes off, and I'm going to run with her. And I can't believe it. She's running. 2 months ago, she couldn't even walk. So we're running, she's walking, she's running, and we round the corner towards the finish line, and all these girls start sprinting past us. And I look down at Lindsay, and she looks up at me, and then she takes off at the finish line. So I want to film this, so I pull out my camera, and I'm filming her from behind, and she crosses the finish line. A volunteer puts a medal around her neck, and I'm still trying to pick her out of the crowd, but I can't really see her anymore. She's just disappearing into a sea of girls. She's now just one of a bunch of kids. No longer the center of attention. No more casts, no more braces, no more wagons. She's just blending in the way she always wanted. Thank you.